Oh my gosh. Hello everybody. I am so excited for today's live stream. This is the most exciting part of the quilt making process. At least for me, it's definitely the most exciting part, which is the actual quilt planning. The free motion quilting is where I live. It's the part that I am the best at. In fact, I was talking to Andrew this morning just saying, like, I have no business piecing a whole Lonestar quilt top on camera because I'm not a master piecer. I'm not a master quilt top piecer. So it's been a little bit humbling for me to get through the piecing process so that I can get to the quilting. But I want to assure you that if you have been disappointed in my skills so far with making this quilt, just know that the free motion quilting is where I shine and I'm so excited for. So I'm glad you're watching here with me so that we can pick up where we left off on this quilt. Hi Melanie, it's good to see you. Hi Deidre. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Okay, so yesterday I did an impromptu live stream to do a Y seam because if you remember 2 live streams ago, I did the first Y seam thinking I was hot stuff, only to realize that the first step in the Y seam process I did wrong and it like derailed the rest of the Y seam. So then I went and practiced, and then yesterday after I had done 5 or 6 Y seams, or 4 or 5 Y seams, I was like, okay, let's do this on camera so that we can do it together, so that if you're trying to tackle a Y seam, I could potentially be helpful, only for my camera situation to be annoying. So anyways, I have resolved my camera issues, fingers crossed, knocking on wood, and I have 1 Y seam left that I want to do with you today, and then we are going to do the free motion quilting drawing diagram stuff, which, like I said, that's my favorite part. So I have my iPad hooked up here where we are going to draw over the top of our quilt top with different quilting diagrams, so that when I am ready to take this to my quilting machine, I will know exactly what's going to go where because I have my whole quilt top planned out for how I'm going to quilt it. Hi Deborah, it's good to see you. Okay, so let me go to the overhead camera and you can see the quilt top. Dun, 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 dun. Drum roll, please. Brrr. Okay, so I have done a ton of piecing. I also added the 4.5-inch borders around the top edge and the 2 side edges. And now that very bottom edge is where my last Y seam needs to go. And so that's what I wanted to do together. So as you can see here, we've got just this last piece. Also, I want to say, I am so proud of how these points came together. Oh, there's a spider. Hi, buddy. These points came together so nicely. So I'm excited to show you those. And then we need to sew this seam together, and then this black fabric here will be our final Y seam. And then I have taken a picture of the quilt top so that we can move into quilting diagrams, and then off camera I will add the final border to the bottom so we don't have to worry about that. But I wanted to have this all laid out, and I took a photo of it before I pull it up again so that we can actually sew this final Y seam together. So let's grab this, and I'm gonna fold this way. And the first seam that we need to do is our star from the center outward. And I have already sewn the point, so now I just need to sew the rest, and then all of our Y seams will be done. So I'm gonna move back over here, and we are going to do this Y seam successfully and happy, and everything is going to go great, and we're not going to have any issues because all of our energy and our intentions are set, and everything's going to be great. So, all right, I have my points lined up here. I'm going to move to my, oh, thanks, Deborah. Deborah said beautiful. Linda says, hi, happy to catch you live again. I probably won't be able to stay and we'll have to catch the rest on replay. Happy quilting. No worries at all. Hi, Rusty. It's good to see you. Oh my gosh, 2 a.m. where you are. Thanks for watching. You can totally catch the replay, but I'm glad that you're here. Okay, so let me move to my quilting camera. Well, that's what it's called. It's called the quilting camera because it's the same camera that I use when I set up my quilting machine. I realized that we are sewing and not quilting. All right, so with this camera, one thing I love about it is that I can zoom out a little bit, and I can use this as my up close and personal camera. Okay, so here is our center point of our star, and it might look a little messy and crazy, but it is nesting together, y'all, like perfectly. Let me show you the front. Look at that. That's like about as good as it's gonna get for me. I am very proud of that. Like, so good. Okay, so you can see my stitches are kind of coming out. That's okay. I'm going to sew over this. So the first thing that we need to do for our Y seam is we're going to sew along this edge. And, okay, so here's the edge that we're going to sew, and then our bottom. So this is where our black fabric is going to come together. So here's the key when you're sewing a Y seam that I have learned. You need to not sew your first 2 seams all the way off the edge. That was the mistake that I made with the very first Y seam that we did with this quilt while live streaming, is I, in my mind, thought that I would just sew this first line all the way here and then split these open and get the black fabric connected. That is not the case. So with a Y seam, we literally need to do a 3-way seam. So what goes here and what goes here is going to be our black piece, and it's going to like loop on both of those. Okay, so what I'm going to do is line up these points, and then I'm going to grab my pin cushion, and I am going to mark with a pin 1/4 inch in from both sides. Okay, so I'm looking at this corner where these corners line up. I'm not going 1/4 inch here, but I'm also not going 1/4 inch here. I'm doing where these points would intersect. That's where I'm marking. So that point is where I need to stop sewing. So that will allow me to open up these seams so that my black fabric can come in here. Okay, and then I also really want my my seams to line up as best as they can, which they should be because it's pretty good. Like my piecing job over the course of these diamonds has been pretty good, but it never hurts to pin in that area. Sorry, 1 second. My dog is at the door barking. She wants to come inside. Hi, bud. Okay. She likes to go out into the backyard through the upstairs back door and then come into the house through the downstairs back door. Okay. And we're going to pin this one as well. Doing my best to get those seams aligned. And when I was sewing this area of the quilt top, like different points coming out, I did notice a little bit of variance in the seams, but honestly, what I have decided with this quilt is that as long as my points are within 1/8 of an inch of lining up, then I am calling that a win. Linda said, it's a learning curves. And Norma said, Y seams are not my favorite. Oh, not my forte. Yeah, they are tricky. You know what though? Honestly, I want to make a quilt that is all hexagon paper pieced blocks that then have to be sewn together with a Y seam, just so that it can force me to practice like 100 Y seams. Because it is a very rewarding outcome when they do nest together nicely. Okay, so I'm on this first point, and I really want to make sure that my point stays nice and intact. So I've overstitched that about 6 times just between what I just did and the last time. Okay, so see, you can see here, I already have a little bit of variance. So I'm gonna take my pin out and just let my next pin kind of help equalize that. And I know it's going to be off just a little bit, but it's, in my opinion, it's better to be off a tiny bit than to have a gather in one of your pieces. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the very slight piecing misalignment between those 2 seams instead of that gather. Okay, and now things are starting to lay flatter, which is great. I cannot believe how big this quilt top is. When I was cutting the 4-inch strips of the rainbow fabric, I did not anticipate that the final star would be just as big as it is. Like, it is gigantic. But I really love it, and I'm very excited to quilt it. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit now so you can see this closer as we get to the edge. Okay, so now I am approaching my final pin that is marking my Y seam. Okay, so remember this point right there is where we are going to stitch to. And I am going to backstitch this as well. Okay. All right, so now we have this seam. We can look at our, let's zoom out again. Okay, so if we look at our seams here, that lined up pretty good. Okay, we don't have to look at the rest of them because we're leaving this stitch in no matter what. Okay, so now we need to add our black fabric to this edge. So here's my black fabric piece, and it is a half square triangle. So the right angle edge, so see how this is an acute angle and this is a right angle. So the right angle is the corner that we're adding to our Y seam. Okay, so I'm gonna hold this. Let's go back to the quilting camera. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I am going to, with my black fabric, I'm going to mark and pin, well not mark, but mark with my pin 1/4 inch in from both the side and the top. Okay, And then I'm going to take my pinpoint and stick it right in there. Okay, so see how it's coming right at that corner. And then I'm going to line those up together like so. And then pin that down like that. Okay, so this orange piece, my third seam that I have not yet stitched, that's just gonna fold backwards so that it's out of the way. Okay, so now this edge is what needs to go together and be sewn together. So I'm gonna pin that. And then, let me move to the main camera. So now, I'm also going to pin the rest of this edge, because one thing that's really important is to make sure that my corners of my star are nice and covered. And so I just want to make sure that I have enough of my black fabric to reach across there. So now I'm going to pin that corner. Okay, so, and then I'm going to find my middle point and pin that as well. So remember how I was like, I don't really pin very much. Yeah, no, this quilt has humbled me. I'll just say that. It's definitely very much humbled me to get back to the basics of piecing. Again, y'all, I don't piece very often, hardly ever. A lot of the quilts that I like to make, I like to design them digitally and then print them onto a whole cloth of fabric and then take them straight to my quilting machine. Like this quilt right here, this is a whole cloth quilt. I didn't piece any of that. I just printed it and then took it straight to the quilting machine. So anyways, this experience has been quite a humbling one for me, which is good. I think that's good. Yeah, so I think we all have those quilts, but I also feel like this quilt is more special to me and kind of more bittersweet when it's done, because it was, you know, it has more of my juju in it. It has more of my energy and my my vibes in it. Okay, so as you can see here, I have pinned those edges together, and now let's sew this down. Let me move the rest of the quilt top back over here. Okay, so now I need to start right in front of that, where that pin comes in, because remember that pin is our marker point, and I need to make sure that I'm giving myself enough of the black fabric seam allowance so that it can swivel over to that orange. Okay, so I'm gonna get right in here, and I'm gonna start a little bit in front of it. So there is the point. Let me zoom in. Okay, so you can kind of see the point of the needle right in there. So I'm going to start a little bit in front of it, and then just like that. Okay. Oh my gosh, did you hear that? That was my stomach. Sorry guys. Did you just hear my tummy rumble? It sounded like thunder outside. Okay, now we got to get this sewn down, and it's staying nice and in place because of those pins. I know. I was scoffing at pinning, thinking like, no, I just want to be able to raw dog it and make my seams perfect every time. And then being like, oh, cool, I raw dogged it, and now I gotta pick those stitches out and do it again. So in fact, I had to do that this morning with the 4.5 inch borders that I added around the edge. This satin fabric, you guys, I almost like, it's so pretty, but I don't necessarily recommend doing that using this satin fabric, just because it is very temperamental. but I was like pulling inconsistently on one edge of the one piece of the satin when I was piecing it to the other satin, and it literally like ruffled like a bed skirt. And so I had to unpick it and re-piece it. And it looks better now. I think I'm still gonna have some slight waves when I go to quilt it, but it's also, I don't think anything so bad that I can't quilt it out. But I wouldn't have that issue at all if I just didn't use satin fabric that is prone to shifts on me, because that's where the wrinkles are coming from, or the ripples are from just the fact that this fabric has some shifty properties to it. Okay, so now we've got our final edge here. Okay, and I want to just make sure for sure that I have enough of an overlap with my corner of my diamond. So that's what I really care about a lot with this quilt top, is making sure that I have enough seam allowance right here so that when I add my 4.5 inch border, it's not going to cut off the tip of my diamond, okay? So when I did those 4-inch borders on the other edges, I was very mindful. So here's one that's already done, okay? And this is what I mean. See how it does not cut off the point of the diamond? I was like militant when I was watching for that to just make sure. So here's another one of the diamond points, the outer points. See how I even have a little extra? So I just was very, very mindful of that. Okay, so we've got one side of our Y seam done. Now back to our point here. Now what we're gonna do is I'm going to swivel this black fabric along with my edge that still needs piecing. Okay, so here's my black edge. So you can see I just pieced that side of the Y seam. This side of the Y seam is done. Oh, I got my seam allowance in there. We'll see if it is okay. And if it's okay, then we'll leave it. Okay. It's kind of annoying, but it could be fine when we fold it down. Okay, so now I'm going to swivel this edge up to this edge. And then again, I don't want to grab any of this green. Like I don't want to accidentally, sew over the top of it into the Y seam. So I'm going to kind of pull this so that it makes like a ridge coming right from that point, just so it's out of the way. Similar like how we pulled this orange out of the way. That's what we're doing here. Okay, so now right in here, see where those points are coming together? There's a seam here and a seam here. So now we need those two seams to basically kiss and start the seam there. Okay, so I'm going to take my pin and put it right in, there we go, put it right in there, and then see right on this side, see how my pin is going out? Okay, so that feels good, and then I'm going to put that into place. So now I know that right there is where I need to stop sewing. Okay, so now we're going to grab this one and pin that as well. Okay, let me come to my main camera and we will finish pinning this. Okay, so I've got my Y seam pins put in place, and then I need to find my corner and then my corner of my diamond. And again, I just need to make sure that I have ample overlap with my black fabric so that I have a nice, generous seam allowance for that border. And it's just protective of my point, my diamond point. Melanie said, I had to tuck 2 corners on the mitered border quilt I just long-armed. One looks fantastic, the other has some pucker. Yeah, oh, I saw that. I saw the image of the mitered corners that you posted on Instagram. Yeah, mitered corners are like a whole nother ball game of adding borders as well. But good for you. I'm proud of you on your long arming journey since you got your long arm at the beginning of the year. You have just done such a good job and you're learning so quickly on how to effectively use your machine, and I'm so happy for you. Okay, so let's add one more pin right here. This feels good. And the most satisfying part of the Y-seam is at the end, pressing it and seeing it lay nice and flat. Man, I feel like I just still feel so embarrassed about the first Y-seam that we did on camera. I was like, this is atrocious. So I'm excited for this one because I think it will turn out well. So I'm gonna get my iron started heating up. Okay, and let's go to the machine and sew this final Y-seam. All right, so again, remember that we need to start right down at that little point, and then I also need to make sure that I'm not sewing over my green fabric anywhere, so I'm just kind of pulling that out so that it's out of the way. Okay, and then we need to make sure that we just start right at that point. We don't need to sew off the edge. So I'm going to get right up over that. Oh, I might have gone a little too far. Guess we'll see when we lay it flat. This is extra tricky to maneuver when I can't get my hand under. There we go. See my hands right here? So I'm just getting that, or trying to get that black lined up and staying there. Because even with pins, that's how shifty this black fabric is. As you can really see it being susceptible to pull. But really, the most important thing for me, since the black is the background fabric, if it shifts a little bit, it's not as big of a deal, but I definitely want to make sure that I'm just keeping a good 1/4 inch on my colored diamond fabric so that my diamonds are the same size on the front of my quilt, right? Like if I take too big of a seam allowance on the black fabric, you won't notice that little extra. But if I take too big of a seam allowance or too small of a seam allowance on my colored diamond fabric, then my diamonds are literally going to change size. And you know, if I had decided that I wanted to computerize quilt this and I had every diamond motif set to an exact specific size, then it's going to vary and be noticeable if my diamonds are not exactly uniform, right? Okay, so this last one, I'm aiming for this 1/4 inch right here. Like that's what I want to sew. So just to keep myself on track, I'm just gonna give myself that extra point. And I can gently sew over these pins. Okay. Yes. Okay, so let's make sure. Okay, so see how I have a good amount of seam allowance between my point of my star and my edge? That is great. That means when I add my border, I can just stick to a good 1/4 inch seam allowance and it's for sure not going to touch that point. Okay, now, moment of truth. Let's look at our Y seam. So let me flip this over. There's our orange, there's our green. Oh my gosh, look at that. That looks so good. Love it. Okay, so last thing we're gonna do is just iron this bad boy. Oh, you're welcome, Melanie. I'm happy to help. Okay, so I'm just gonna lay this down. And okay, when I, where was it? Was it this seam? Every time I did a Y seam, I pressed from the front, or sorry, from the back, and then also from the front. So I wanted all of my black pieces to be pressed actually towards the color side, toward the color side. Sorry, it's not towards, it's toward. Okay. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want the seam allowance fabric from my colors to make like an indentation onto the black fabric, because the black fabric is softer. And you know how like on the front of your quilt, sometimes you can see the seam allowance from that fabric, like just the ridge or the outline of it. And I didn't want that. And so I decided that with all of the pieces, I would iron them toward the color, because the color is, I don't think the black outline is going to show on the colored side because the colored fabric is a little bit thicker. So anyway, so that's the decision I made. So when I press each of these, I'm pressing them toward the color. Oh, Deborah said, looking good. Thank you. Yes, I am very happy with that last Y seam. So really, Y seams, I don't know. They're kind of this like elusive siren of piecing, you know? Like they're not called for very often, but when they are called for, it's for a really beautiful reason, but they can also lure you to your death unless you can charm them back. Okay, so I like to press from both sides of the quilt top. I feel like the first press from the back just gives a good like stability of insinuating what direction I want the piecing to go. Okay, and then also for that final seam, I'm trying to decide if I should press that open so that it lays as flat as it can. And I think that's actually what I want to do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start pressing it open from this Y seam. And this is the only seam in the entire quilt that I'm pressing open. Like I don't particularly like pressing open normally, especially because a lot of the quilts that I do piece, I know that I'm going to be quilting them interpretively. And if I want to do stitch in the ditch quilting, seams that are pressed open are just more prone to popping when you're stitching right over the top of them. And you're not actually catching as much of the fabric itself, which is the whole purpose of quilting it, is to, you know, get those layers adhered together. So, yeah, so that being said, this is the only seam that I'm pressing open. And the reason that I'm choosing to press this seam open is so that my very center point where the star comes together, oh my gosh, it looks so good, you guys. I'll show you an up close in just a second. But it's just so that the star point that comes together is going to lay as flat as possible, because that is quite a bit of seams all coming together at one point. And that can be very bulky. So, okay, let me hold this up and show it to you. Look at that. Do you see that? Oh, hang on. There we go. I just can't believe how well that went together. Okay, so now let me flip this over. We are so close to being done with these shenanigans and we can move on to the quilting. So don't go anywhere quite yet. I'm just gonna get this last seam. Sheesh lavish. This quilt top is gigantic. I haven't measured this actually yet, but I wanna say it's gonna be close to about 110-inch square. That's what it feels like right now. And my batting, I know that my batting is 90 inches wide. So maybe it's not 110, maybe it's closer to 100 inches, but I don't know. And now I'm like, the more that I work on this quilt, the less I want to part with it when I'm done with it. But I don't know, like I'm still trying to decide what the end result is for this quilt. Like if it's a quilt that I want to enter into a show, or if I want to raffle it off, or if I just want to straight up list it for sale, I would definitely love to be compensated for the energy and effort and time that went into making it. But I also realized that this quilt has totally been a science experiment for me in figuring out like YouTube monetization, right? Like this has given me a direct goal to achieve that we get to do together, and something for me to showcase while I, worked on getting monetized. And so, I don't know, this quilt has multiple uses for me already, even when it's not even done. Okay, so now I'm just pressing that final seam. I'm really so proud of how nicely those diamonds are coming together in the middle. Just looks so good. And the quilt is like actually laying flat, you guys. Like the last Lonestar quilt that I made, the very center had a little bit of struggle in terms of laying completely flat. But this one is looking really great. And I don't know how I'm going to quilt it, how I'm going to quilt the center. But if I wanted to stitch in the ditch in the very center, I totally could. It looks that good. Okay, so I want to pull it up on the sewing camera just so you can see it really closely. See, look at that. There's some threads that I need to just cut. So I will trim those. But y'all, okay, let me trim them right now because it's bugging me. I want you to see it in all of its glory. Right? Like, okay, for being a self-proclaimed not master piecer, like that's pretty good, right? Anyways, okay, enough gloating. All right, y'all. So I have the borders that I need to finish sewing. I've sewn most of them on, but because we did that Y seam, I had that last final border that we still needed to do. And I'm not gonna make you watch that, but I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to do a successful Y seam together. So I'll probably pull that footage out and make it its own video, just if anything, even just for me to refer back to, so that in a year from now, when I haven't done a Y seam for a year, then I'll have that video to refer to so easily. And I'll throw it up here on YouTube. Throw it up here. I will put it on YouTube so that it'll be easily findable. And I know there's like a billion Y seam demonstrations, so between me and all the other people who have made a video about it, I am confident that you'll be able to tackle a Y seam if and when you ever need to. So Linda says, this last Y seam is very informative. I might be brave enough to try them again. You should. I think you should. Even just a little piece of fabric, like maybe just try it literally with just scraps of fabric and see how it goes. So, and just do it with like 2 45-degree diamonds and 1 square, just like the quilt looks like. So, okay. Now, before the live stream started, I took a photo of the quilt top all laid out, and I have it on my iPad. So let's go to the most exciting part of this journey, which is the free motion quilting diagram schematic planning. I love this part of making a quilt. I really enjoy the process of interpreting a pieced quilt top and seeing different ways that it can be quilted, because there's lots of different options that we can do. So I want to kind of walk through the thought process of what it would be like to have a quilt top and look at it now with fresh eyes. Like, we've been looking at piecing the quilt top for so long. Now I want to look at the pieced quilt top and the design and the structure that's there, and really figure out how the quilting is going to inform the piecing, or inform what the message of the quilt is going to be, so that it can work in tandem with the piece design instead of detracting from it or from totally ruining it, right? Like, my goal is to make the quilting and the piecing work in harmony to present a visual image that is aesthetically pleasing. So I have my iPad here and I have the quilt loaded. Okay, so here is my iPad design. This is the photo that I took when it was laid out before the beginning of this live stream. And because this quilt is symmetrical, I really am just going to be drawing on the top half of the diagram. We'll do a little bit in the center, but for the most part, we are going to work from, the top half. Because another thing with like coming up with a diagram for quilting is that I like to plan out just enough so I can get started. I don't like to draw every single little detail. Right now, this part of the process is just to get us prepared enough that we're excited to go to the quilting machine. That's the goal. I don't want to load this whole thing onto my machine and not have some sort of image to look at, to refer to be like, wait, which color was on which side? And, like, I want to know exactly what the quilt's going to look like. Not exactly, but a good idea of what the quilt is going to look like, so that when I'm working with, 18 inches at a time, like on our quilting machine, we may only have, this much space at a time that we can actually fit within our throat space. And so, having a full picture of what the quilting is going to look like is just a really nice way to be able to refer back to it while I'm quilting and say, okay, on this layer of the diamonds, what design goes where? Okay. So for this, now I have not pre-planned anything. I want to say that whenever I do this, like, it's literally off the cuff. I have not planned anything out and, tried to like mentally come up with what the quilting is going to look like. So we are really going to go through this together. And I want to invite you into my brain and my thought process of all the possible ways that lots of different possible ways that we could quilt this quilt top. All right. So I'm going to come to the iPad and I'm actually going to take this off so that we get a really nice, good view. Now, what I like to do is I will turn the opacity down on the quilt top and then create a new layer. And then that way, as I'm drawing, it's very easy to focus on the quilting designs, but still be able to see and interpret the blocks. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so that feels more like what the quilting scale line could look like. All right, now let's first talk about edge to edge designs, right? So actually, before we even get there, there's another thing that we need to address. Anytime you are interpreting a quilt top design or you are preparing to quilt a quilt top, one of the main things that you need to ask yourself first, I feel like there's kind of an order of operations of different ways to decide how to quilt a quilt. But there's important questions that you need to ask yourself before you even start planning the quilting based on what you want the end result of the quilt to be. Okay, so let's actually, I'm going to do this. So let's turn off this layer and I'm going to put this one behind. And okay, so there's going to be kind of an order of operations here. So we can first say function. What is the function of your quilt? Is it going to be a wall hanging or snuggly? Something that's actually used on a bed, right? Or put in the washing machine is another way to look at it. Okay, so now if it's a wall hanging, there's different options that we can do here. So we could do stitch in the ditch work, right? We can do primary interpretive, or we can do secondary interpretive, and then we can do edge to edge. Okay, so this is kind of the spectrum for wall hanging quilts. So stitch in the ditch is where we really honor the piecing to its highest extent, right? Because when we are stitching in the ditch, we are literally following the piecing lines. Okay, then primary interpretive, so think of this as kind of like a spectrum, a hot and cold spectrum. So this is hot, wait, no, this is hot and this is cold, because stitch in the ditch, it's going to be the most effort or tons of effort and skill. Whoops. Linda says, you deserve your preening moment. Well done. Thank you. Linda says, what app do you use for drawing your design on a picture of your quilt on the iPad, please? It is called Procreate. Kim, tell me what part you missed when the ad popped up. Or do you have any questions? If you have questions, let me know. All right, so with stitch in the ditch, it's going to be honoring the piecing, tons of effort and skill, and also typically you'll need a ruler because seams are straight lines and we want straight lines. Okay, now primary interpretive is going to include some stitch in the ditch and then a lot of like dropping motifs, meaning that you have a block and you drop the design right into that block. So let's say we have our diamond blocks here and we're going to stitch in the ditch around the edge or inside of that ditch, right? And then we might put a design straight inside that really honors that design, okay? So it's like we're dropping a motif right into that spot. Maybe another one is like we stitch in the ditch and then maybe we do some straight lines inside of it, okay? So the primary interpretive is where we prioritize the piecing, okay? And this might also include things like echoes around your designs, which leads me, so we would just say little echoes as well, okay? Now, echoing leads into secondary interpretive. So secondary interpretive might be something like, let's say we have, let me draw this a little bigger. And let's say with one of our 9-patch diamonds that we have, we might stitch in the ditch in our center diamond. and maybe do like a 1/4 inch echo around that diamond, and then maybe a 1/4 inch echo on the inner path of the edge of the diamond. And then inside of there, we could do, you know, something like this. Okay, where now we're using the path of our piecing, but notice that we are just stitching over so many of these seams. So we are disregarding seams. So, oops, let me get my other. Disregarding seams. Okay, more echoes. And now we are creating secondary shapes. Okay. And then edge to edge. So notice like we're going over points, right? So the next step in that would be like an edge to edge. So let's say we have that diamond block. And for our entire quilt, instead of trying to interpret each of these blocks, we are just maybe like filling in the block with kind of an edge-to-edge style filler design. Okay. So notice how with each of these steps, we are becoming more independent from the piecing seams. They are informing our quilting, or in the case of an edge to edge, they're not informing the quilting at all. Okay, so now with wall hangings, the main identifier with this is going to be density, because so tons of density, because we don't need to snuggle it. Okay, or at least this is in my mind, right? This is fairly loose, and the type of wall hangings we like are going to vary from person to person. Okay, so now we have, this is what's cool about, like, I'm trying to like mind map for you what I would think in my head as I am planning out a quilt top. Now there's going to be redundancy between the snuggly and the wall hanging quilt. And another thing, and so let's talk about snuggly now. So let's just move into that. Okay, so snuggly, if we know it's going to be snuggly, then the first thing that we need to do is talk about backing fabric. Okay, because if we use a traditional quilting cotton, then we need to err on the side of less density in the quilting. Because the more that we do, the more quilting that we do, the stiffer it's going to get. So I'm going to say more prone to stiffness. Okay. Then we have something like a satin or a silk, like lightweight and slippery fabrics. Okay, so I'm trying to think if I have a quilt. I do have a quilt, but it's hanging up, so I can't show it to you right now. But we can go a little more dense. But we still are not going to get that snuggliness factor the denser that we go. Okay, and then we have like fleece and plush. Okay, and in my opinion, oh, I spelled fleece with an S, that's silly. Fleece and plush. Plush. Okay, in my opinion, we can go more dense with our quilting, because that plushiness is going to help keep some of that heat or that warmth in, even though there's a lot of thread in there, okay? So I want to show you a prime example of this. Okay, so this quilt is pretty big. This is from my online course. Sorry, I dropped something on the ground. This is from my online course called Lonestar Border Bliss. Okay, now the quilting on this quilt is very, very dense. Like there's pebbles, whoops. There's pebbles that are like smaller than my pinky fingernail. Okay, and there's really dense pebbles along the edge of this as well. So this quilt, let me roll my chair back. This quilt is very densely quilted, very much so. It's a large sized quilt, but then it also is quilted very densely. And I would consider this as a primary interpretive design choice with what I actually quilted, with a little bit of secondary design sprinkled in, okay? But this plush backing fabric gives me so much permission to quilt densely, because even in these corners where I'm doing really super tight pebbles, they really blend in with that plush fabric. And so the quilt stays snuggly and drapey and very warm because that plush batting is doing a lot of heavy lifting, okay? So I hope that makes sense. And then same with this quilt here. Oh, let me fold this up really quick or drape it back. Okay, so again, this is a very heavy quilt and very, very comfortable. And I was able to quilt much denser than I think I could on like a quilting cotton and have it still stay warm and snuggly and not get too stiff. Okay, now this quilt I did piece. This is one of the other Lonestar quilts I pieced. It was really hard, guys, but I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of how it turned out. Okay, and I did very dense quilting on this quilt as well. Okay, like you can see, especially the very middle of this quilt, see those pebbles? So there's a lot of quilting going on here, but I used a plush blanket on the back of this as well. And because of that, this quilt has stayed very snuggly and soft. So your backing choices can definitely determine a lot of the outcome of the functionality of your quilt. So if you want, so it's more like trying to determine what you want out of your quilt so that you can just keep yourself in check when it comes to the quilting, so that you're happy with the end result, okay? So functional, snuggly, wall hanging, okay? So hopefully this kind of makes sense. Now you can do the spectrum that we have here. So this like spectrum of interpretation, that's what I want to call this. Spectrum of interpretation. And this is basically how much the piecing is going to influence the quilting. And whether it's a wall hanging or a snuggly quilt, you can do both. It's just that if you want to do one of these, you need to be mindful of what type of backing you're using if you want it to be snuggly, okay? So it's almost like, yeah, this mind map doesn't make total 100% logic sense, but it starts to break down the different ways that you can think about approaching a quilt for quilting, especially for free motion quilting. So this is definitely a more advanced kind of concept to think about. And the more quilting you do, especially the more free motion quilting or interpretive quilting you do, the easier it's going to be. Okay, so with our spectrum of interpretation, I would say if we want to, like we could say levels of difficulty. So easy to hard. Okay, so here is that spectrum. So easy would be edge to edge. that's where we just ignore the piecing entirely. Whoops. We ignore the piecing entirely and just quilt however we want, regardless of what the piecing looks like, okay? And then next would be secondary interpretive, where we use the piecing, we let the piecing whisper to us. And I'm going to show you examples of all of these with the quilt top that we're working on, okay? And then we have primary interpretation. Okay, where that's like the piecing is in the driver's seat. Okay, and then we have like literal stitch in the ditch work. And to me, this might be a hot take, but to me, doing all stitch in the ditch work is not creative at all. Like in terms of quilting a quilt, the quilting is basically not going to show up at all. It just becomes a functional portion of getting, it's a means to get the layers quilted together so that it's technically a quilt. So yeah, I feel fine saying that if you do just stitch in the ditch work, that's not creative at all. It's just literally playing dot to dot and following lines. So it's monotonous. It is tedious. I'll say tedious instead. It's tedious. Tedious. O-I-O-U-S. Okay. So it's tedious. It is hidden. And it is requires some skill and tools. Or it requires a specific skill. And ruler. I would not do stitch in the ditch without a ruler, like ever. Just because if it's not perfect, you notice, or I notice at least. So, okay, so I would also argue that secondary interpretive is the most creative because it's like being able to come up with designs that complement the piecing without detracting too much, but also not being so scared that you just stick to the piecing itself, I think requires some skill. So, okay, so now that we've kind of mapped that out, I'm going to turn this back on. I'm going to turn that layer off and let's create a new layer and let's talk about the various designs. So let's say edge to edge first, right? So an edge to edge means that we are literally, oh, let me get my better brush. There we go. We are literally ignoring the piecing altogether and just doing some sort of line art quilting design, right? So this is an edge to edge, free motion edge to edge that I like to do sometimes. It's called the fingerprint fill because as you fill in, it starts to look like a fingerprint. Okay, but see how I've really just tuned out the quilt top altogether, and I'm just basically getting the layers quilted together. So an edge to edge, I would say, is one step up in creativity than the stitch in the ditch. Okay, because with the stitch in the ditch, you literally don't even need to know how to free motion quilt an edge to edge, where this, at least, there's some rhyme and reason and some practice that happens with doing an edge to edge design. Okay, So there's one edge to edge. Another edge to edge could be, like one of my favorite edge to edges that I like to do is called the Carly Curl. And it looks like this. And again, this is kind of crude because I'm going quickly, but it's a really good crowd pleaser of an edge to edge design. But again, notice that my line is just disregarding the piecing altogether. And okay, another concept in the free motion quilting that we have not talked about at all, but could talk about for hours and hours, is thread choice. Okay, so just like your backing choices, your backing fabric choices, your thread choices can also make a huge impact on the finished look of your quilt. So like right now I am drawing this with black. I don't think I would do black thread though, because see how much it's going to show up on the quilt. If I turn this quilt all the way up, so it's going to blend into the black but then show up on the color. I don't know if I necessarily want that. So that's something I need to consider as well. But if I was doing like invisible thread where it blended a lot more, it would be more textural and less, you know, bright and standing out. Okay, so that's another thing to think about. We're not going to cover it a ton yet. What I want to do first is get the diagram figured out and then choose thread color. I usually choose thread color right before I go to my quilting machine. Okay, so there's a couple edge to edges that you can consider. Okay, now stitch in the ditch work, I'm not even going to draw it because I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. And I also know that I'm not going to be doing it for this quilt. So that's like a whole separate thing. If you want to learn stitch in the ditch, I'm not the person to teach you because I think it is not fun or creative or enjoyable at all. Oh, Linda says, oh, sorry. Yeah, Linda asked, would you still add wadding when using a plush backing? So yes, I always add batting no matter what, even if the plush is really fluffy and big. In fact, you'll want, if you're using like this backing type where it's like very super soft and plushy and like minky, you definitely want to use batting, because otherwise if those layers of the fiber are thick, or not thick, long, if it's like shaggy, then as you're quilting, if you don't if you don't have batting between your quilt top and your backing fabric, then that like shag is going to pull through in your stitches, in your quilting stitches, and then you're going to have little dots of that color of that shag that are going to pull up. So that is a great question. I get asked that a lot. One quilt that I made, in fact, I think it's close, or it was in this stack of, oh, it's under here. So this quilt right here, I made this for Andrew the first year that we were married, and I saved up all my pennies to buy minky backing for it. And the front of it is just a flat sheet from the thrift store. And when I first started quilting it, I didn't use batting, and right away the stitching was pulling up even the minky, like this is just like that dimpled minky type fabric. Right away the stitching started pulling that shag up to the front of the quilt, and I had stitched like 2 rows before I noticed, and I was like, oh man, I really hate that. So then I just put batting in it and kept going, but then it wasn't the same like density as the rest of the quilt, and so I ended up just chopping off those, I don't know, it was probably 9 inches worth of the quilt, and then binding it. So yes, always add batting, even if you're using a fluffy or a plush or a fleece backing. Definitely just still add batting to it. So thank you. That's a great question. I really appreciate it. Let's see. The Jag says, this is outstanding to go through this process with you. You are amazing. Thank you for sharing your talents with us and teaching us. Oh, thank you. That is so sweet. Well, I really appreciate you guys being here. And if you like what you see, now that my YouTube channel is monetized, I have something called a super chat feature, and it's basically like a digital tip jar. So if at any point in time y'all really love what you're seeing and you feel like throwing a tip, just know that you can do that. In the chat box right next to the button with the emoji, there should be a little rectangle with a dollar sign. So yeah, I'll just throw that out there. If anyone feels like sending a super chat, that's totally awesome. But and also like engaging or not skipping the ads also helps me. But yeah, I just appreciate you guys being here and hanging out with me while we do this. So and especially this video, like I said before, this is the funnest part. I mean, the actual quilting, when I get this loaded onto my machine and quilt it, I will live stream that as well, so you can see me executing the diagram. But this is like the most fun part. This is where my brain really swirls and explores, and we haven't even actually started drawing motifs yet. So, oh, thank you. The Jag sent a super chat, $9.99. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that a lot. Truly, it really means a lot to me. So thank you. You're awesome. Melanie says, Aurifil just demoed 12 weight in a baby lock long arm. The heavy weight is so good. Okay, 12 weight thread it's kind of like a beast that's fun to tame. If you don't tame it, then it is not fun. But it does look really beautiful when it is quilted, and it looks really nice. So thanks, Melanie, for that. Yeah, so thread, when we talked about, okay, let me go back to my iPad. When we were talking about these various things, another thing to consider is, whoops, there we go, is the thread type. Because that is also going to inform the snuggliness of our quilt. So if you're going to use thick thread, then you need to be less dense, because that thread is going to add weight and density to the functionality of the quilt. Okay, if you're going to use thin thread, then you can be more dense with your quilting. Okay, so another thing to consider. So just like with here, with traditional cotton, you're going to be less dense with your quilting, and your thread can also determine that as well. So with fleece, we can be more dense. With thick thread, we should be less dense. With thin thread, we can be more dense with quilting. Okay, so we have talked about edge-to-edge designs, right? We have 2 different edge-to-edges that we could do. Now, like I said, I'm going to skip stitch in the ditch. Oh, hi, Nate. It's good to see you. I'm going to skip stitch in the ditch. Now, let's talk about how we could do a primary interpretive quilt design. Okay, so primary interpretive is going to incorporate stitch in the ditch, just like I said, right? Didn't I say that? Primary interpretive, yes, stitch in the ditch. Okay. But then we're going to add more things. So if we zoom out of this a little bit and look at it just as a whole, there's different areas where we could really interpret and stitch in the ditch, but then add design. So like, let's maybe say, I want to do 2 diagrams of primary interpretive. Okay, so I'm going to get less talky and more draw-y, and kind of get into a flow state of drawing a primary interpretive design. And a thing I like about Procreate is that if I hold a line down for a second without moving, it'll snap it to a straight line. And anytime I snap it to a straight line while I'm drawing a quilting diagram, that essentially means that I'm using a ruler, right? So stitch in the ditch, you can see right now, this is representing stitch in the ditch. Whoops. Okay, and I'm going to go around the full star for this, but then we can move to just the top edge, because if we know that we're doing a symmetrical design, we really only need a good drawing of each section. We don't need to draw the diagram for the entire quilt. Okay, and then let's maybe, okay, so with primary interpretive, we will use stitch in the ditch, but not everywhere, okay? So right now, I haven't even thought about what's going to go into each row of this design, but I am starting to block out sections of how things could look, okay? So oh, thanks, Melanie. Melanie sent me $2 for a super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's kind of cool. Andrew and I took our kids to the Salt Lake City Busking Festival a couple months ago. And so sometimes I feel like I'm digitally busking when I let you guys know that there's a spot to add tips. Just like the street performers who are juggling and doing tarot card readings and shooting fireballs into a target while riding a unicycle. Okay, so I've got my stitch in the ditch down. Now we can take each of these areas and interpret them. So with a primary interpretive, I probably would not stray very far from these blocks, and I would just try to do stitch in the ditch here. And then maybe something like, let's see, something like this. And again, I am just doing this off the cuff. Like I'm just kind of making it up as I go. Okay, so see how my design is really honoring the shape of the pieced block. So primary interpretive is very much about that, about honoring the pieced block and constraining anything that I quilt into those blocks. Okay. And now the nice thing about this symmetrical design is that once I know what I'm quilting in each area, it's just a matter of repeating that for every area. Okay. Okay, and then let's see, what about the next row? Maybe for the next row, we could do some straight line stuff. Okay, so this would require more ruler work. And I'm not opposed to ruler work, but it's also, okay, here's the thing. I enjoy ruler work. I don't enjoy stitch in the ditch. So I have to use a ruler to stitch in the ditch. It's not about the ruler, it's about trying to effectively stay in the ditch. Okay, so see how I'm starting to get a little bit more secondary, but it's still pretty structured to my piecing. And again, I'm just going halfway for the sake of time. I don't need to draw the entire diagram. I just need to get enough so that I could start quilting. Okay, let's see, and then maybe here I could do, maybe we'll do something like this. Okay, so I'm really just coming up with shapes that fit into each of these blocks. And the shapes that I'm doing don't care about other areas of the quilt. It's just in this area of every quilt, that's the design that I do. Okay, now here's another thing that's good about primary interpretive designs. Typically, like you can see here that our blocks are, our actual blocks on this quilt are 4 inches, right? Remember how that's the size of our actual diamonds. Where is my, oh, there's, I was like, I didn't think I went far enough. Okay, I'm gonna draw a line here just so that I can also remember that I don't need to go further than that. Okay. So with primary, with primary interpretive designs, chances are I will be able to pretty smoothly quilt my quilt from top to bottom and not have to worry a ton, because every time I have to stitch in the ditch somewhere, it's going to be like basically a spot that I can baste my quilt and work in that area. Okay, so let's see, another, maybe I could come here and do this. Like that. Okay, so now I'm starting to get more intricate shapes here. So what could I put in this diamond, right? So I have a lot of diamond options. Maybe I could do a curl and another curl and maybe a little teardrop and a teardrop, like that. Okay, so then I just need to do the same thing in every diamond. Okay, so see how I'm starting to just play with those shapes and kind of treat them as their own blocks. So now I have this whole space in here. I could either break it apart further, or I could start to interpret it now, where see how this seam here, I'm going to be disregarding, but then I'm still stitching in the ditch. Okay. So I'm still interpreting each of these areas, and I'm honoring the piecing that's there, but then I'm also coming up with motifs that are not necessarily being, like I wasn't told to do those motifs by the piecing. Okay, so I could do something like that. And notice my density as well, right? Like I'm trying to keep the entire density of the whole quilt pretty uniform so that my quilt lays nice and flat. Okay, that line isn't perfect, but that's okay. Kind of looks like a little collar, like a shirt collar. Okay, so now I've got that row, and then I've got this middle star area here. So maybe in this area I'll do like something feathery, like that, where I draw the spine coming up, and then I use that space and fill it in with feather plumes. That could be kind of cool. So I'm trying to kind of split the space between those to keep it fair. And notice that my spine of my feather totally disregarded this line right here. It didn't care at all. But my feathers are honoring those stitch in the ditch lines that I initially designated. Oh, Rusty says, the Sandman is about to take me hostage. I shall catch up with the replay. Good night. Thank you for being here. You are awesome. Kim says, good night. Kathy said, sent thumbs up for 10 jewels. Okay, I've seen a couple of those and I'm not sure exactly what they mean. I should Google what the jewels are because I don't know what the jewels are. Okay, let's do another feather coming out of here just to really kind of round out this diagram. Okay, so I had a plume there and then a plume here and they kind of come up and then, so see how now I have designated space where I know exactly where my plumes need to go because they're honoring that path that the piecing created. But when it comes to all of these seams, I actually don't have to care about them at all. Okay. And these feathers are going to make my quilting more dense because see how much overlap is going on in here in the spine, right? So that is something to also consider when it comes to my thread choice. If I'm using a 12 weight thread and then I do any quilting that even overlaps a little bit, it is going to be very, very dense and stiff. It's going to stiffen up the quilt very quickly. So if I'm making a wall hanging, 12 weight thread can be a totally great option and the quilting is going to really pack a punch and show up really clearly and beautifully. But if I want this to be a functional quilt, then that's something I need to consider as well. And maybe reevaluate my density. So one way we can do it, I'll show you with these feathers right here. So maybe with the density, instead of just doing a spine, we could also come back down and do a gap in the spine. So that will spread out those, that overstitched line. So now notice that instead of having both sides of the plume going up the exact same path of thread, I've spread that out a little bit. And now it will just make it a little less dense. So that's one way that you can kind of give yourself a little bit of grace with your density in your quilting, is doing like echoes and layers. And that'll kind of spread things out, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Let me just draw this one and then I can zoom out and you can really see the difference. Oh, Kathy, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Norma said, my summer staycation ends next Wednesday. When will be the next live stream? Great question. So I actually have friends coming to stay with me this week into next week. And so I'm not sure if I'm going to live stream next week, which, okay, here's the good thing about taking like a week off from live streaming. It means that I can plan out my schedule further so that y'all can prepare for the live streams and know well in advance that they're coming. So I don't have my next live stream scheduled yet, but I did plan for this live stream to be the final hurrah of planning the quilt out. And the next live stream, my intention is that I'll have the quilt loaded on my frame, and it'll be ready to start quilting, which I'm super excited about. So, okay, so let's come back here. All right, so can you see the difference between this feather section and this feather section? See how one is a little, like, it kind of looks just as dense, but the reality is that we've spread out the thread just a little bit. So that's something that can help as well, okay? So here is a primary interpretive example. So now I want to jump into secondary interpretive and really kind of play and explore with this. Okay, so secondary interpretive basically means that instead of using a lot of the stitch in the ditch paths like we have, we are instead just going to be focusing more on points of interest of our piecing. Okay, so it's going to inform, obviously it's going to inform our quilting diagram, but it is not going to be so rigid. Okay, so here's just off the cuff, I'm just gonna start drawing and kind of see where things land. So see how I'm kind of playing dot to dot? Think of this kind of as like dot to dot. I have different points of interest in a symmetrical design that I can start playing with now. So maybe in this whole area, I'll just fill it in with pebbles. Okay, so I'm disregarding the piecing altogether for this new shape that we've created. And I'm trying to vary the shape and size of my pebbles. Okay, and now I also need to be thinking about density. For instance, these blocks, like this is probably about a 8-inch octagon shape that I've just made. And if I had started my pebbles much bigger, like this, that's really going to inform the density of my overall quilting, okay? So something to consider. I think I'm fine with the density that I have established here because I am almost certain in my head already. I haven't fully decided this, but I think I'm going to make this quilt a functional quilt or a snuggly quilt because wall hangings, you can still hang a functional quilt on the wall. But I don't want to make a quilt that is only designated to be a wall hanging, because then if I don't hang it on a wall, the only alternative is that it's, you know, stored somewhere. And I think my intention for this quilt is for it to get used. And it can get used and it can also hang on a wall at some point. I do actually have a decent sized wall in my living room that I could potentially hang this up. I don't know if I actually will, but to know that I could hang it on a wall or drape it over my bed, I think makes it more valuable. Or if someone purchased it, you know, knowing that they could do that as well would be great. Okay, so see how I have a secondary design on top of my primary piecing design, okay? So this is what I mean by secondary. Secondary, think of secondary kind of as like a ghost to your piecing, where it is very much taking cues from the piecing, but then it is morphing into shapes of its own, okay? Let's see. I think I am going to use this ditch now. So primary and secondary design, they're like sisters, not twins, but they get along very, very well. Okay, so the principles of primary interpretive design are built upon by secondary interpretive. And again, it's like a spectrum of hot and cold. There's a lot of degrees of temperature in between, but I would say that primary interpretive design is kind of lukewarm, and secondary interpretive design is more comfortable, at least for me. Okay, so now see how I've got this nice pretty flower shape here? So I wonder what I could do in here. I think I also want to do a small echo. Oh, whoops, I didn't go far enough. Okay, so when I actually quilt this, I will like literally measure how far away from the line I want to be. And then I will mark those with little dots in these areas, and then just play dot to dot with my ruler or with my Pro Stitcher. I have a Pro Stitcher, a computerized machine that allows me to like quilt perfectly straight lines where I can just mark the points in my dots. So that's another option as well. Okay, so I like the shape of this flower idea, and I think I want to use the rest of this path here. But I really want to protect those lines, and so I like the idea of doing those inner borders. So in my mind, this would be like a 1/4 inch border is kind of what I'm thinking. Okay, so see how that's like looking more polished? I feel like with primary interpretive, because I just stitched in the ditch and then filled in each area, sometimes the designs can get a little bit muddled or like just kind of tight. But just taking the time to add those little teensy 1/4 inch borders is really going to elevate our quilting. Okay, so now see how I created a new point to work from? So it's where the line crosses over. I'm going from this point to that. See that? So I'm starting to get more of these secondary shapes. And because my piecing is not exactly perfect, these lines might not be exactly perfect either, but that's okay. Okay, but see how that's starting to create a really cool effect? Let's see. Okay, and then I do like this as well. And this can help keep me on track as well. So I think this is going to look really, really cool. Okay, so there's a lot of straight edges, straight lines going on right now. I want to kind of soften this up a little bit. So I'm trying to think of a way that I could do that. Maybe I could do even something like this. I don't know. Maybe I'll come back to that. I'm getting kind of a writer's block on that. Okay, so we have this area here that I can do something. One thing, okay, so I was thinking about doing like a clamshell like this, but then see how it doesn't, like, I would need to decide, do I come to this point and cross over? I don't love how that looks, but then if I do just this, whoops, like that, that could be cool, but then how do I handle that area? Do I do something like that? And then maybe put some pebbles in here. That's kind of nice. It has kind of a very royal, like jewel feel to it. And then let's maybe do a smaller clamshell inside of there. And then in here, maybe something like that. Oh, Melanie, I do like the idea of wishbones, but I think I want to save those for a different spot. Okay, so let me fill in this space a little bit more. So come up there and down. Let's do little circles there too. Okay, so I can continue thinking about density, right? So it's like, I do like this area, but if I wanted to make it more dense, I could add another pass inside of here. And that's going to thicken it up more. And I can also make that decision like as I go. Like just because it's in my diagram doesn't mean I have to execute every single thing that's in my diagram. Okay. So now I'm still at kind of a loss for what I want to do here. Like something in my head is kind of telling me maybe I should keep it geometric, but I just don't know exactly what. Okay. Let's do in here something like this. I like that. I want to do something like kind of florally. I don't love that. I don't love how it's asymmetrical between each one. Oh, you know what? Let's do something kind of like this. Okay, let's go. Something like that. I'm kind of off center and I don't love that. Okay, now that I kind of have an idea, what I'm gonna do is make sure that I'm gonna do one loop, two loops, big loop, one loop, one loop. Okay, so I'm basically trying to fit two loops here and then a big loop here. But even still, I don't think that the edges of my big loop needs to go as wide. So again, let's go 1, 2, and then let's do a flower petal shape. 1, 2, like that. Okay, and then let's go like this. Whoops, my hand kind of slid too far. There we go. That I like. Me like it a lot. Okay, let's see if I can do it again. So one loop. Okay, and my loops are not fully touching the top there. Okay, so I just got to be mindful of that. Whoops. Sorry, don't mean to make you sick. Oh, Judy says it reminds me of stained glass windows, and Melanie says what you're doing is pretty like cake icing. Yes, I agree. I think of cake icing when I do loops like this. Okay, see that second side is where I need to get myself in check. So this would be a motif that I would draw on my fabric before I quilt it. There. Okay, those two look pretty similar. Okay, let's see if I can do it 2 more times. 1 loop, 2 loops, 1 loop, 2 loops. Taller flower petal, shorter flower petal with the loop. There we go. Okay, I like this a lot. I really like that. Okay, so 1 loop, 2 loops, flower petal, 1 loop, 2 loops, bigger flower petal, and smaller flower petal. Okay, all right, guys, this is filling out nicely. And these are kind of like the unsung heroes, because those little echoes just really kind of separate things nicely, right? Like you can very clearly see the design and which design is supposed to go where. Let's see, that was another. And then clamshell. And circles. Okay, and then I also added an extra pass in there, like this. Okay, and then let's do this one too, so that we just have a nice half of our diagram. Okay, so one thing that's really beautiful about secondary interpretive design is that even though it is free motion quilted, we're really setting ourselves up nicely to just know exactly what thing needs to go in what designated space. All right, now here, this next spot is where I feel like secondary interpretive is really going to shine, because so far we have kept our shapes well within each of the rows of our diamonds that we've pieced, right? So this could even still be considered, if we're looking at primary interpretive and secondary interpretive, it's like kind of right here. Like it's not quite really getting into secondary. So now let's elevate this. All right, so the next point that I want to use is right here. These little Y-seam armpits in between our like triangle petal shapes here, okay? So what I'm gonna do here now is I am going to stitch straight across, okay? So see how I've crossed over quite a few of these lines, but it's given me basically a square. It's a very linear shape, and the point that I'm aiming for is that pieced block, okay? See that? Okay, and then same again, boom. I know exactly what angle I need to go. So again here, like that. And here, like that. Okay, see how we have this nice overlap situation going on here? I'm gonna use that. Okay, so last one would be here, and we got that one. Okay, so now we have some interesting stuff going on in here because we crossed over those lines. See that? So we can kind of start to play with this a little more. So another thing that I want to do is I want to start breaking out of the confines of the actual star itself. So what I'm going to do is another 1/4 inch border and another 1/4 inch border. And see how I'm starting to go into the black area? This is going to set me up later. So another one here and another one here. Okay, and then same here, like that, and like that. And this one too. I hope it doesn't make you guys too dizzy when I'm flipping the screen around all over the place. Okay, so I really like how that's looking. I especially like this spot. See, those borders really just protect things really nicely. Okay, so let's maybe do some more lines. Like, what does this look like? Like that. Okay. Okay, I really like this too. So again, I'm going to go to where those lines intersect, even though they're not like actual points of my diamonds. They're just an edge of my piecing that meets an edge of my quilting. Okay, so down there and down there. So we could even go to that middle one like that, like that. So, oh, why does that one look different? Oh, never mind. There we go, right there. Okay, so see how I have those spots to aim for? And again, you guys, I did not pre-plan any of this. I'm just making this up on the fly and deciding with every step whether or not I like it and if I want to move forward. Okay, so now I want to break up a little bit of this space instead of it being so straight edges everywhere. So now I'm going to do some, I'm going to audition these and see how I feel about them. But what would it look like to do some contour lines in here? Like that. We could do them here too. Ooh, okay, I'm really liking that. So I'm happy with it, so I'm going to continue. Okay, so now I also want to see how many am I doing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so can I try to space these out enough that I get 8 with each one? So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whoops, my eraser engaged. 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now as I do each of these sections, I'm just going to count in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we'll do this one too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I like that. Okay, so see the secondary that I'm talking about, right? Like this right here is really showing off, and I like that. So now it looks like this area is tucked behind these points. That's exactly what secondary is all about, is the piecing, right? The piecing is informing the quilting, but then the quilting is really kind of coming off of the quilt a little bit and giving the illusion of depth as we add these new elements on. But then we're also honoring those piecing lines, so some areas look really bright, but then we're also dismissing some of those piecing lines so that the texture of the quilting is what shines in that moment. So it's like they're having a conversation back and forth where both things are communing equally, and they're kind of equally balancing each other, right? You guys have been so awesome. Thank you so much for watching this. I'm not quite done yet. So obviously when we are doing quilting diagrams, like the edge to edge designs, those took us 30 seconds each, right? They were not anything super crazy. The stitch in the ditch, we didn't even draw at all because we're like, I'm not gonna waste my time showing you what you already know. And then the primary interpretive, it took a little less time because the piecing already was informing and telling us what to do. But the secondary interpretive, which is, I think, kind of the most magical quilting experience, is going to take longer because we're coming up with new things that the piecing didn't. Like, it's like, hey, you could try this, right? So that goes back to what we were talking about, how the secondary interpretive is like letting the piecing whisper, right? That's what it's doing for us, is we're listening to the piecing and letting it whisper to us. All right, so let's keep going on this journey of secondary interpretive because I'm really, really enjoying it. Okay. So we now have, I want this point to shine more and kind of give us more of like an insinuation of spanning outward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stitch in the ditch for this whole next 2 rows. Okay, so see how that point is insinuating itself up to this point? They match, right? They're like echoing. This is just what I've just drawn here. This is just a really giant echo of this cute guy. Okay, so again, let's do another 1/4 inch border here so that no matter whatever I add in this area, it's going to be protected from whatever I add out here. Okay, so while I'm thinking about what to put in there, let me draw those diagrams. And it doesn't have to be a gigantic thick border in order to be protective and just do its job of really, you know, interpreting that area. Okay, then let's do this one as well. Now I did really like those feathers that we did in the primary interpretive. Like, I think feathers in this area can be a really fun thing. So that could be kind of cool. And this area here, I have no idea what I'm going to do here. I don't even have to plan that yet. I'm not even thinking that far ahead. Okay. Oh, Kim says, I have to go. We'll watch the replay. No worries. Thanks for coming. Oh, Lolita said, thank you for this beautiful lesson. You are welcome. It's my honor. All right. So let's see. We've got this space here. What if... what if we did do those feathers? Kind of up to a point. Let's see. I think I like those thick plumes kind of as like a flower petal. So see how, or not plumes, sorry, the spines of the feathers. So see how I kind of have a flower petal? Now I want to add feathers. And when I do this now, I'm just hugging those edges as I add plumes. Okay, and then let's do the outside as well. Sorry, just one second, I'm gonna go shut my door. Okay. All right, so I've got my outer plumes, and now I'm gonna just kind of imagine a dotted line for the plumes on the inside. So kind of just going straight up, but I can do a little bit of a variation. And then when I do the other side of the plumes, I'm just going to really hug that area. Okay, so again, I'm just hugging the space with my plumes. Okay, so I want the space in between here to be as small as possible. Instead of going like this, I want to really fill in that space as much as I can. Okay, and then maybe at the very top here, I can just do a cute little pebble. Oh, okay, I really like this. It feels like this is the diagram that I'm going to end up having to do for this quilt. Okay, let's do, before I move on to this outer area, I think I want to further extend this as well. And I want to do 2 more 1/4 inch echoes there. I really like the structure and that point that's going into the black space here. I think that's really cool. Okay, so now we're going to stitch in the ditch here. Okay, and then I want to do an inner border here as well. And I think I also want to do one on the outside. Yeah. Okay, so now I have this last little area to play with. I think this would be a great spot, like Melanie was recommending, to do the wishbones. So what I'm going to do is actually, instead of trying to do it like a border, like this, straight, I want to do it at an angle to honor these lines, but then it'll also help me, I think, when I'm getting up into this space, like that. Okay, so that means I'm going to start here, and I'm going to hug the edges of the top and bottom, but I'm also not going to touch between. Okay, so I'm just doing each loop like this. I'm not going like this. Okay, so see how that's tighter? That's a deliberate choice. I could go tighter if I want, but I am choosing deliberately to keep my loops from touching each other, and I'm using these 45-degree lines kind of as my angle for traveling. Okay, and then when I get to the top here, the ones, they need to kind of mimic this shape, so they're going to curve a little bit. And then the bottom ones are going to be little, and the top one is going to be big. Okay, and then I'm going to come back down. So it's a little bit of a tricky learning curve, but I like the idea of those wishbones kind of being at an angle. They're like italicized. Like that. Oh yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, so that's my whole diagram. Now, I have all of this black space out here. And let's be honest, people, because if you know anything about me or you know my history with free motion quilting, you know that I am most known for graffiti quilting. And there is nothing nicer for graffiti quilting than a big, wide open, negative space background for that. So whenever I'm doing a diagram where I know I'm going to do graffiti quilting, because graffiti quilting is very off the cuff and off the fly and not planned out, I don't draw all of those motifs on my diagram and then try to go quilt them. I simply designate the space as graffiti quilting. So on my diagram, here's what that looks like. So I know that I'm going to have this outer border here, and then everything else is going to be graffiti quilting outward. Now, there's a couple ways that you can do graffiti quilting, and we talk about this in my graffiti quilting online class. So if you want more info on that, go to carlyporter.com. It's a huge, very robust, incredibly amazing free motion quilting class where we talk about what we've talked about here in this last 2-hour live stream, except for the Y seams, in much, much deeper depth. Okay. And you get this amazing textbook. It's almost 400 pages. You get lifetime access to over 100 hours of content. It's a whole amazing, super great thing. So if you have not yet taken Graffiti Quilting, the online course, I would highly recommend it. Anyways, that's the last of my sales pitch for that for now, but go to carlyporter.com to get all of the information on it. I do a yearly cohort, so just look for when the next one is going to start. So when I'm doing graffiti quilting, whenever I am doing my diagram, I just designate where the graffiti quilting is going to be. Okay, so now I don't need to draw it out, but I know that this whole area, and starting from my edge of my design going outward, is where the graffiti quilting is going to go. Okay, so same with out here, graffiti quilting. And this way here, okay, so it's always just radiating outward. Now, there's deeper options on how you can decide which direction your graffiti quilting goes that I haven't talked about in today's live stream, but we definitely, like I said, talk about it in great depth in the graffiti quilting class. So this is my diagram. Now, as you can see, again, I did not have to draw every single part of the quilt to know what is going to be quilted where. All I really care about is this area telling me that I'm going to repeat it again and again and again and again and again, right? Okay, so I have not fully decided how I'm going to quilt this quilt top. I have the last few seams to do, but it feels like if I were to take a poll and have people vote on which one they think I should do for quilting, I feel like secondary interpretive is going to win because that's what everyone wants to see. Now, this is obviously going to be the most time consuming to quilt and also the most intensive to quilt. But again, I have been talking about this and bragging about this, that this is where I really shine. So I'm just going to make the executive decision that in the next live stream that we do with this quilt, it will be for this diagram. So we are going to do secondary interpretive, which, like I said, this is a more advanced free motion quilting technique, but it's not as scary and as advanced as it seems, right? Like it's all just kind of taking things, breaking them down into simpler structures, noticing certain patterns in the structure, and then taking it one little section at a time with the quilting. So when you look back at this quilt, you're going to look at this and go, oh my goodness, that is incredible and amazing and so well thought out and well planned. And oh my gosh, the way things overlap and the way that they fit together, that just blows my mind. But really, I know exactly what is going to go in which section of which area of the quilt, and it's just a matter of executing it. And I say just, like, you know, I agree that like it's much easier said than done, but this is what quilting's all about to me. This is the whole thing. So if I'm going to take all the time to challenge myself with piecing this freaking thing, then I am going to do it absolute justice to the best of my ability when it comes to the quilting, because I need, for me, my quilting needs to meet or exceed the skills of my piecing. And it always has. Like I've always been way better at quilting than I have at piecing. Piecing, like I said, it's just a means of to an end to get there. The quilting is my favorite part. Like it's, I don't know. It's where I love to live in the quilt making process. So anyways, okay, this was so much to take in. We were so productive. We got a lot done. I would like say that this is like the most fun live stream up to this point. The quilting is going to be really super fun. I will be using my Baby Lock Regalia longarm quilting machine. I have not decided on a thread color, but part of me is kind of thinking that maybe black might be a good idea. Or maybe using invisible thread that is dark smoke colored so that we can still have some of that color, but then it's also really going to, like, obviously I want the quilting to show up on the camera really well so that when I am quilting, you can actually see what I'm doing. And I think you will, because the camera angle is really good. But I do need to think deeper about what color thread I'm going to use. Like I could go a little bit insane and do white thread so that you could truly, really see it well and it will show up really well forever. I don't know. Maybe that's probably a point where I'll do like a poll on Instagram or something and say like, what thread color should I use? Because the thread color choice could make or break the quilt as well. I have a quilt that I made quite a few years ago that was custom printed fabric and it was rainbow. Surprise. And I did all over graffiti quilting, just like edge to edge graffiti quilting over it with white thread. And I don't love it because I feel like because the quilting did not acknowledge the design of the fabric at all. It was just like a whole graffiti quilting edge to edge over the top of a design that I also thought was beautiful, but it felt like the quilting was like, yeah, enough about you. Now let me shine and not care about what you're saying. And so I don't want that to happen again. And I don't think that it would with this. But I also realize that there's going to be some areas of this quilt where I am stitching in the ditch and doing kind of trying to be a little more precise in what I'm doing. And white is going to take no prisoners in terms of outing me on any little mistake that I make. So I think black would be cool because it would really show up on all of the rainbow and then it would kind of blend into the black satin, which is a cool idea. Like the black satin kind of has this like Vanta black kind of feel to it where it's very dark and the star is so bright. Like let's look at the quilt again without the diagrams, you know. So if I turn that all the way up and then turn the diagram on, so that's kind of how it would look with black thread. And I don't hate it. I don't hate it. And I don't think that black thread would darken it too much. So I don't know. I'm now thinking that my options for thread will be between invisible thread, invisible smoke thread, or black thread. But I kind of really like how the black is showing up so vividly on the color, and then it'll really just blend into the back really, really well. So I don't know. I'll have to sit on it and sleep on it and think about it a little bit. But that's probably a good part about taking a week off from doing the live streams with this quilt, is to give my brain some time to catch up. Because the quilting is also the most intricate and thought-provoking part for me. With the piecing, it's like I knew what I needed to do. I just had to get it done. It was very tedious and very monotonous and very, I was going to say uninspiring, but like it's the same thing over and over again. The piecing did not really stray from the few steps that we did to get to where we are. The quilting is a lot more intricate of a set of steps on what to do to execute. So, yeah. So yeah, anyways, okay, that's all for today. Thank you all so much for watching, whether you're watching this live or watching the replay. I very much appreciate it. If you ever want to drop a tip in my digital tip bucket, then you can, or my digital tip jar, I think that's what I'm calling it, my tip jar. Feel free to leave a super chat, and yeah, those tips are always really nice and helpful. So yeah, okay, well, until next time, happy quilting. I'll see y'all later.